Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on subjects such as leadership, visibility, presentation skills, and communication. My guest today is one of the first people I interviewed, so I'm happy to have her here on my 100th episode. Julie Castro Abrams is the CEO and chairman of How Women Lead, which is a network of over 20,000 women dedicated to promoting diverse women's voices and propelling women's leadership forward. She's also the managing partner of Board Leaders, where she actively places leaders on corporate boards, supports them to build inclusive and high-performance boards. She's an expert on board governance and building diverse boards that are a strategic advantage. She's also an experienced nonprofit CEO and entrepreneur, and through her consulting practice, she supports leaders to build high-performance boards, breakthrough performance for these leaders, and high-performing multicultural teams. Julie is also an active investor and advisor to startups. And she sits on the advisory boards of the fintech startup Lend Donate, New Search Collaborative, and is the governance chair for Women's Funding Network in a network of women's foundations across the globe. As the leader of How Women Lead, she's also created How Women Invest, which is an investment fund to support female-led organizations, and How Women Give, which is a venture capital fund for women-led startups. Julie Castro Abrams is one of my favorite people in the world. I can't wait to have you meet her. Julie Abrams, welcome back to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
It's so nice. And, it's just because we've all been online for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. It's been almost 2 years since I interviewed you. You were one of my very first interviews. And
I can't even believe it. Yeah, it's amazing.
I know. And the last time you talked about the tipping point for women's leadership. Before we get into that, however, I'd like to ask you what I ask all my guests, which is, if you could interview someone who's no longer around, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Yeah. Maya Angelou has to be my
Maya
person.
Angelou.
I probably have a list as long as my arm of brilliant, mostly women throughout history. But for me, she represents this absolutely overcoming the most difficult challenges and then becoming so peaceful and centered and powerful and impactful and with an intellect and like nobody's business, right? Mm-hmm. So I would love to, not one thing. I mean, I would love to understand, what is it that made her feel like she could take up that much space? So many of us are, we shrink from our power, and this woman ended up becoming the voice, and everybody in the United States has been impacted by her, if not, much of the world. So.
And I don't know anybody who doesn't just go, "Oh, I love Maya Angelou." Yes,
exactly.
Right.
There's so many beautiful poems like Phenomenal Woman that just give us that sense of everybody's invited. It's all possible, right?
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, speaking of phenomenal women, you and I've known each other for several years now, and in the context of your company, the organization that you founded and you run, which is How Women Lead. And I know, like any other any other social justice organization, there have been ups and downs. But we last spoke in December of 2019, having no idea what 2020 was going to bring. And in 2020 and 2021, it seems to me like How Women Lead has grown and expanded and really stepped into herself.
Yeah. The pandemic has been such a massive loss for so many. And I want to acknowledge that, including my father-in-law. We lost him to COVID. And so knowing that backdrop and feeling great pause and compassion for everyone, it actually provided an opportunity to reset for many of us and to think, how do we do things differently? And for my organization, I used to see you in person every other week,
I know.
We would do events in person, and they were beautiful and amazing. And you would have thought, if anyone would have said, hey, put everything virtual, I would have said, that's insane. You could never do it. But because everyone was forced to learn how to use Zoom and change our way of being. And in fact, many people were very hungry for connection. We figured it out very quickly, how to create virtual programming. And I think because of that, we were a place for safety and connection for people. And we immediately had a daily gathering of people would generously offer their time to hold a container. Maybe it was some kind of a leadership lesson, or maybe it was some kind of almost like a meditation and just check-in and safety. So we did that for a long time in the beginning, and it was all I work in community. And everybody stepped up in community. And so once we saw that people were like, okay, I think I've got this, then we went to really pivoting to creating really rich content. And I found we could deliver more content because I wasn't driving and planning, what were the appetizers and, how we're going to set up the chairs. We also were able to reach people all over the globe. And so whereas we were only in the Bay Area, when I last talked to you, it honestly was such a short amount of time ago. If you think about it in our lifetimes,
exactly,
we've completely transformed. 30% of the people participating are now outside of the Bay Area. We're actively engaging people in other communities, like we're creating DC and New York hubs, for example.
And can actually, before you go any further, talk about how do you define what the organization is or who it's for?
Well,
we skipped that because you and I both know it. So
yeah, sure. So this is an organization, honestly, it's designed for women like us. It's designed for women who've met a certain level of career success and frankly, even a certain age. There's developmental things. Life's different when you're starting in your mid 40s. We need different things. So it's really designed for women who've been in careers and who are now in that life stage, and they're looking to have an impact. They're looking to do things together. And we use the lever of these powerful women who have so much experience and goodwill and energy and commitment to each other to make change in the world. Our goal is to address inequity for women. And so we do that at the very top of the funnel, if you will, with the intention that if we get women in the highest places of power and influence in the country, we all are better, because we know that when women lead, everyone wins.
Yeah.
So that's really what the organization is about.
Addressing that inequity. And before we go on, I would also like to just touch on the credo. I actually, I pulled it up so I can read it out loud, because I like to read it out loud, which is: be fierce advocates for each other, say yes to connecting each other, reinforce her voice, and be unabashedly visible. Where did that come from?
I think it came first and foremost, I grew up in an era where that is countercultural. We had problems in the culture I grew up in with women being mean girls. We have movies about it.
Yeah.
And,
Mean girls. Yeah.
stabbing each other in the back, like literally, like there's fear about, if I let you in my circle, do I have to fear you, which is terrible. Women weren't making introductions for each other. They would hold their connections really close to their vest, and men weren't like that. And so honestly, the credo came because I was sort of saying, gosh, I wish we were better with each other. And I would encourage people to be these ways. And and I'm on a journey myself. And at a certain moment in time, I just reflected and said, what if I put this down and just define it as a culture and an aspiration, and ask everybody to step up and do their best efforts to be this way with each other. And when we were in person, you would watch the wave in a room go across the room. I hope you remember that, where all of a sudden people would be like, oh, those are the rules of the road. Okay, we're going to be next to each other. I felt like fear and some of the guardrails would drop down. And you would watch people. Everybody likes to help other people. And so the invitation to do that in real time was kind of a gift to every single one of us, me included.
Well, I also think that so much of it is because there have been advances in the last few years, that this whole thing about women being afraid of recommending other women was because there was only room for one. You could only have one woman. And so if another woman came in, that meant that people thought that meant you would lose your space. And certainly as part of this, I can remember times where I was trying to step up and lead. So I have my own scars on my head from glass ceilings.
Sure.
And realizing later that if they had let a girl in, they would have had to let another couple of girls in. And there were men who really didn't want to have a girl on their playground.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I wasted years thinking that it was my problem. Yeah. It was something wrong with me.
Yeah. I think so. Your story is everybody's story, really, Elizabeth. And what I really truly believe in my bones is, there are all these things that we know, like we say, women don't ask for the money, and now we used to kind of blame women and say, buck up, learn how to ask. Well, you know what? We actually now know it's honestly gotten, right? There are penalties for women who ask compensation. There are penalties all over the place. And often, nobody tells you outright, you just learn it the hard way. So my recommendation to everybody is like, be gentle with yourself, forgive yourself, invite yourself to state your new way you want to be, and invite other people to join you on that. And the gift of having done that myself with this credo is that everybody steps up. And now today, every single engagement we have, we read the credo outside or at the beginning, and we invite everyone to do a thumbs up, or it's an invitation to buy in. And people write me messages every single day or verbally thank me and tell me that they are living it. They've got it on their desk. They tell other people. To me, if that becomes a wave that takes over and we replace the culture, this new culture and way of being, imagine the potential and the opportunities we could all have.
I love that. I've had it on my wall ever since I met you. and I send it off to my clients all the time. So when we first met, we were talking in the context of getting women on boards, and how Women Lead was very instrumental in having the governor of California sign a bill requiring women on corporate boards. Yes. Can you talk a little bit about, so I know that you were part of the movement that made that happen. What have you seen in the last couple of years in terms of progress?
Yeah, I'm really,
or not.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to say we've seen substantial progress. In California, we went from 15% of the public company board directors in California were women, and now it's 29%. One of the things that, there's a bit of this concept that maybe there's a meritocracy in our country. and that the best people were getting the board seat. Somehow you were lowering the bar if you required women on boards, and that's not true. Now we know that is wholly untrue, and we've seen not only a shift in the composition of those boards and people's attitudes about it, but we've also seen not just gender composition, but also what kinds of, I'm not sure the law had all that much to do with it. Maybe it inspired it some, but we've had new demands. Instead of all CEOs and CFOs on boards, what we're looking for is people who have HR experience, who have crisis communications experience, tech more and more. Having people who were CEO 10 years ago on a board, it does not help you with your technology, cybersecurity, or other cutting edge issues, because that person is often no longer in those operator rooms. And so they're out of touch with some of that stuff. They have lots of other things they can certainly bring to the table. But what we now know is diversity of all types is absolutely essential. In addition to the California legislation, which is being replicated in 6 other states, we also in California passed a law for sexual orientation and ethnic and racial differences. So those, the combination of all of those, in fact, are now part of a NASDAQ requirement. So we've seen a
NASDAQ. So for our international listeners, NASDAQ is one of the stock exchanges.
Yeah, and nobody legislated that to NASDAQ. NASDAQ made a decision themselves that
they require that if you're going to do an initial public, or if you're going to be on
if you want to be listed on the NASDAQ exchange, you are required to have diversity on your board.
Wow.
Absolutely. That happened this year. So what I like to say, 85% of board seats come through relationships and referrals and word of mouth. And most of us, our networks are like us, are similar education, age, ethnic, or other identities. And one of the things that we know is with 30% of the board representation being women right now in California, when you are looking for your next board member, that 30% of women get to be part of that referral network. So all of a sudden, when people used to say we can't find women or women of color or whatever definition, they now are finding them because the networks are now much broader because of the representation of people who are on those boards. So I feel hopeful that, let's just say, the law gets shot down somehow, which I cannot see. We have a couple lawsuits of very right-wing, very fringe organizations. My belief is that we will never go back.
Yeah, I think so too. And I heard you once say that the magic number is to have three women or three people of color or whatever. Can you explain that a little bit, please?
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence, anecdotal and literal, that if you are the one exception in a room, you do not actually change. You don't get heard, and you definitely do not change the culture. What we also know is that if you get 3 people in a room, they back each other up. When someone speaks and isn't being heard, the other person can amplify them, and it just changes. It's a power shift. Most boards are, 7 to 10 people. Most public company boards are even 6. So having 3 women on a board is substantial voice. So that certainly is part of it. But we also know, think about this. The data says that, you have about 26% better financial return when you have a diverse board. You also have all kinds of other beautiful things, like recalls happen 3 times faster. Now,
recalls meaning
a product recall, a dangerous product, something that went out in the market that you have to recall. It happens 3 times faster when you have diversity on a board. Now there's a friend of mine who's a professor at Stanford, Amy Wilkinson, and she's done research that shows that when you have diversity in a group, boards or otherwise, it upgames everybody. So groupthink is what's very dangerous. Groupthink means you and I, Elizabeth, we were in many ways, similar cohorts, a group of women like us. If we get together, you'll be like, Julie will always bring the up-to-date information on the corporate board stuff. I'll bring all the information about what are the best, frameworks for speaking and all kinds of other things. And I'll just over-rely on you, and you'll over-rely on me for the things that we each do, just because we know we think the same. We trust each other, and we trust each other's expertise because we know we think the same because we grew up very similarly. And that's actually kind of dangerous, because then everybody's relying on me to bring all of the research and the thought and the perspective for that one area. Or often, there are a couple people who do all the work and a couple people who just are yes people on those groups.
Of course,
right?
yes. As in every organization, yes.
It's human behavior. That's what we do. We like being around people who are like us, because then we can shortcut conversations. We can have references about, different cultural or business things. I can talk about Jim Collins' book with you probably much easier than I can with a 25-year-old, right? So there are all these things that happen, and which make it more fun and much easier to make decisions, but they're not necessarily the right decisions. And that's the rub.
Right.
And so when you have three people on a board, it upgames everybody.
So three people of three different types.
Yeah, just different kinds of people. So, if you have a bunch of, white guys who are 50 who all went to Stanford, and then you put, a 40-year-old Black woman on that board, in three of them even, it's a whole different thing. And everybody all of a sudden starts reading the board materials and preparing differently, because you would need to bring your perspective, because there are multiple perspectives in that room. And you don't just kind of get lazy and relax and think, oh yeah, Elizabeth will take care of it. She always does the homework.
So Julie, we've been talking a lot about boards. Just for those who are not sure why having boards of trustees, people who aren't living in the corporate world, and our international listeners, got just a couple of sentences about why women on boards of trustees, why that matters.
Yeah. So trustees is probably not the name that you use for all boards. So
corporate
I would say
boards, then.
Corporate boards is what I would be referring to. And this is the thing: the legislation's around public company boards. That means this company that grew up is actually seeking more money, more cash, and the people who started the company want to make money. So they basically are selling the entire company to the public. It's called an initial public offering, an IPO. Now we can put our retirement money into that company. I'm an owner in that company then, right? You have public ownership. If we have a public owning a company, we have a responsibility to manage that company on behalf of the public. And therefore, we need a board of governors, a corporate board of directors who oversee the company at the highest level to ensure that it is being managed well for the public investors. So that's the way to think about it. And that's not the way a lot of these boards or even leaders in companies think about it. I'm an owner of your company if I own stock in your company. You need to do a good job and represent my interest when you are leading that board. And so what I would say is 19% of Americans are Latinas. And about 1% or less, depending on what index you're looking at, of corporate board representation is Latina. How is that representative of all the Latinas investing their money in those public companies? It's not. And so we still have a big disconnect. We are not representing the public investors in those public companies. And to pretend like the only people who can be good governors of those companies are white men CEOs of other tech companies or other companies is very short-sighted and wrong. it's wrong. So we have a shift in our thinking and this, it's often been like you get paid to be on those boards, big money. If you're on three of them, you can make $2 million just from the board seats alone. So, I think we all need to reset our thinking about who we're responsible to and who can add value when you are on a board, because it doesn't add value when you've got people who are shirking their responsibilities, not preparing for board meetings, and having groupthink, make bad decisions. That's why Enron was such a disaster. And we've got countless examples of this throughout history and even today. What happened with WeWork? Right? What happened with the governance of that company that went public? How could we have allowed that to happen? So
exactly.
So we, if we want to this, and think about this, it's not only my money being invested, it's all the employees working in those very large companies. And women and people of color are not paid equitably today. Latinas, the most underrepresented on corporate boards, are the lowest compensated in the United States. They make, depending on the number you're looking at, about 54% of what a white man makes. So we need to be better if we want to have the future, a healthy future. It's not good for anybody when she's making less. In some cases, it means that she is needing to rely on public resources to support her family because she's working plenty. She's not getting paid equitably. So
are you seeing progress in other leadership fields besides boards?
Well,
it's sort of a trickle-down effect, but
in some ways it is, right. So we have a science around how we do disruption here, and we will pick different categories of disruption. So our science is you work on systems, regulation, legislation, you do movement building. So like just on Saturday, I did a program for the Chicana Latina Foundation, and I got an email from someone saying, I never even thought about going on a board, but I could. And so you're planting the seeds, getting people thinking about it, changing how they think about just like I was talking about representation on these boards and who they're responsible to, changing our thinking. The other thing is training women so they have all the skills and preparation and confidence to take those board seats. And then we place women on board. So we work across that system. We are also doing that in venture capital. So Elizabeth, do you know what percentage of all
there's my next question.
What percent of all venture capital dollars go to women-founded companies?
Oh gosh, something, I don't know, 20%? 2%.
2%. And if you look at the top 50 the 50 venture firms in the United States, most of them have 0 to 5 women CEOs in all of their investments. So
I mean, the companies that they're investing in.
Yeah, exactly. The leaders that they're investing in. So that's a problem. It's a mistake. We are all losing out. That is bias, and it's costing us money. It's costing us jobs, and it's costing us, products that we want to see. So I am a big strategy across my system to work on systems, legislation, and regulation, do movement building. I want 10,000 women to start investing in venture. I want women to understand how do you start playing big in this space.
You have how women lead and how women invest and how women give, right?
We do. Yeah, we do. And so we started a venture fund last year. And we're raising our second fund right now. We're making investments in companies founded solely by women co-founders, with a big focus on women of color. And our investors are women and women of color. And we make it easy for first-time investors to on-ramp and start investing and learning about venture. And I'm really happy to say in just this last year, We asked people not too long ago, have you invested in another venture firm? And 30% said yes. That I'm so thrilled that people are finding their sense of power and influence and connectivity in that way.
Wow, that's awesome. Julie, I'm so happy to have you here. How Women Lead is such an incredible organization. I'm so glad I found you. I'm so glad I've been a member, for several years now. And when I see all the things that How Women Lead does, I'm always in awe. How can somebody, because How Women Lead sponsors so much, where could somebody start? If there's someone who's listening to this podcast and curious, where should they start?
If you go to our website, howwomenlead.com, we have something called an ecosystem call. It just means we'll give you an overview of what the organization's up to. And literally you do a self-assessment and figure out, where do I fit? What's good for me? But this is the truth. Elizabeth, you started showing up. You made yourself visible. You said hi. You started offering to share your experience and skills. You coached me. You coached other people in speaking that are part of our community. You gave of your heart and your skill set. And because of that, you started to feel a part of this community and like you owned it. And that is how that works. There's no fee to become a member. Everybody pays like $50 to come to things so that we can pay for our staff. But beyond that, it's not exclusionary, it's inclusionary intentionally. It is designed for women who are top leaders in their organizations because they're the levers for these big changes we want to make in the world. But I want people to feel like they can see themselves as investors and board members and in other halls of power in this country. And I want to thank you for being an amplifier. You live the credo. It's such a gift to be your colleague and to see all the impact you're having in the world.
Well, Julie Castro Abrams, you were one of my favorite people in the whole entire world. So I just love having this opportunity. And you were almost my first guest. I think I was my first guest. So you were just about my first guest. And now you are my 100th guest to celebrate how we are moving forward, and just anything I can do to amplify the great work you're doing. I'm going to keep doing it and shouting from the rooftops.
Well, we need to hear from women, and thank you for creating a platform for people's voices so that we can get results. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Julie. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. We will be having more and more information about Julie Castro Abrams and How Women Lead in the show notes. And meanwhile, if you're curious how your presentation skills are doing, you can take our free 4-minute quiz at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you are strong with your presenting skills and where perhaps a little support might help you get the results you need and the recognition you deserve. Thank you, Julie Castro Abrams, for coming back to honor this podcast. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.